You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. All right, another day, another portal edition for LSU. This time it's Destin Hill, wide receiver from Florida State. If the name sounds familiar, it should if you're a Louisiana football or Louisiana high school football fan. So Destin Hill's from New Orleans, went to Edna Carr. His recruitment, though, was kind of an odd one. He was a top 15 receiver in the country in the class of 2021. But he didn't enroll at Florida State until 2023, only saying that he sat out of football for 2 years for personal reasons. Never disclosed anything more than that. But he's a very high upside guy. Just a strange path from high school to college. It is worth noting, obviously, 21 was just a year removed from COVID, and a lot of people were dealing with a lot of things there in the aftermath of COVID, and I don't know if there was anything related there, but it's just worth mentioning the timing. The further removed we get from COVID, maybe the quicker we are to forget what a completely horrendous time that was for everybody. So Destin Hill signed with Florida State in 2021, but didn't show up on campus until 2023. So his first game played, his first collegiate game, was the game against LSU in Orlando to start the 2023 season. Throughout that 2023 season, he played in 10 games. He actually started twice, but he had ankle and hamstring injuries that really limited his production that year. And, of course, that was the undefeated Florida State team. So in 2024, this season, Destin Hill was expected, of course, with Keon Coleman going off to the draft. This was supposed to be a big-time leap year for Destin Hill, but he was injured in spring football and missed the entire 2024 season. They never disclosed, a lot of secrecy. They never disclosed the nature of the injury. However, he was seen around spring on crutches with a brace on his knee, so a lot of people were led to assume ACL, something along those lines, a knee injury that would cost you an entire year. I went back and read his high school scouting report from Barton Simmons, who now is on staff at Vanderbilt, but at the time was the director of scouting for 24/7. And Barton Simmons compared him to Tyron Johnson, a former five-star from New Orleans. If you remember, Tyron Johnson was a five-star from Warren Easton, signed with LSU, struggled to get on the field, transferred to Oklahoma State, was a very productive receiver in that Oklahoma State offense. So just sort of understanding what type of receiver Destin Hill is. Not overly big, he's 6 feet tall, but burst, explosiveness, speed, just hasn't been able to stay healthy. And while he's 4 years removed from high school, he's only really played one college season. So you have a guy with high upside, but not a lot of skins on the wall who's coming in. And so when I look at the addition of Destin Hill, I am really excited about that from LSU's perspective. However, you can't look at that and say, well, all done. That's what you needed in the portal. I think there's, he's a high upside guy, but not someone that you're 100% counting on to say, yep, that's a certainty. He comes in immediately and makes you better. He might, but there's no certainty. The other thing when I look at LSU's wide receiver room for 2025, you have enough numbers now, okay? Aaron Anderson, Xavion Thomas, Chris Hilton, who we're all assuming is returning. He's practicing for the bowl game, has not made a declaration that he's transferring, opting out, anything like that. Kyle Parker's coming back off of injury. That's 4. You've got Kylan Billiot, Jelani Watkins. That's 6. The 2 incoming freshmen, Teron Francis, Phillip Wright, that gets you to 8. And then you've added Berrien Brown and now Destin Hill, that gets you to 10. You're at 10 receivers. That's plenty. That doesn't even count Trey'Dez Green, who tight end, yes, but moved to receiver more this year. So that would even be 11. Your numbers at receiver are fine. But what you are still lacking is, and you may not get this in the portal, but what you're lacking is the guy that is the true, undisputed, number one game breaker. And there's one guy still out there who could be that, and it's Nick Anderson. So we're keeping an eye on that decision from Nick Anderson. If you're not familiar with Nick Anderson, he was just a 3-star coming out of high school. Nick Anderson was a 3-star in the class of 2022, played in 3 games that year at Oklahoma. In 2023, he went kaboom. Played in 13 games, started 6 times, had 10 touchdown catches on just 31 receptions. Think Brian Thomas. All he does is catch touchdowns. That's what Nick Anderson did at OU 2 years ago. 31 catches, 10 of them were for touchdowns. He averaged 21 yards per reception. Say that again. He averaged 21 yards per reception. That's on par with what Jamar Chase did in his Blitnikoff season back in 2019. So if you add someone like Nick Anderson, okay, now you're cooking with grease and you're done at receiver. But it's down to LSU, Texas A&M, and we'll see ultimately what decision Nick Anderson makes. And I'll remind you, there's always the possibility that someone else could go in the portal. You could add another receiver. There's always the spring portal window as well. And you could go into the 2025 season with Berrien Brown as a 3-year contributor at Kentucky, who's capable of being a number 1. Aaron Anderson, who was your number 2 this year and was awesome. Chris Hilton, who could certainly have if he could stay healthy, have a big impact next year. Kyle Parker coming off of injury, Xavier Thomas, a high upside guy in Destin Hill, and then all the young guys that I mentioned. So, and then there's always the possibility of Trey'Dez Green, which is kind of the other sort of wild card here, is while your numbers are fine, and I would argue you need a true number 1, what you also need is size. Berrien Brown at 6'1" is your biggest wide receiver currently on the roster. Destin Hill's 6 feet tall. Aaron Anderson's 5'9". So you could certainly use a 6'2", 6'3", big-bodied receiver like a Brian Thomas, which you don't have. Again, the asterisk, the caveat is Trey'Dez Green. Trey'Dez Green could, in theory, be that guy if you keep him at receiver instead of moving him in, putting his hand in the dirt as a tight end, but we'll see. But ultimately what it comes down to right now is that LSU's got 8 additions via the portal, and I think it's so interesting to watch this evolution because Brian Kelly's first portal class, like when he was first hired, remember, he had to remake that roster. They had lost half their roster. So Brian Kelly had to remake that roster. And if you remember, what he did with that first portal class was he went and got a bunch of kids from Louisiana, players from Louisiana who left and brought them back. He went and got Greg Brooks and Joe Fouché and Jark Bernard Converse, Mekhi Gardner. You'd go in later at guys like Jalen Lee. Remember, they were going to get guys who were from here, who left, and he brought them home, guys that wanted to put on for Louisiana. And that was kind of the idea in those first couple of cycles. Well, last year, you took fewer numbers, only 9 transfers, but you decided to take numbers at positions of need. But what you didn't do was add impact guys. You added bodies at position of need, but not impact guys at positions of need. Now, you're saying, what are our positions of need? And who are the best players in the portal at those positions, and let's go get them. And I think that's the glaring difference. I don't think you're gonna wake up when this portal window closes and see LSU with 20 portal additions. It's not going to be like Ole Miss last year when they added 29, 30 portal additions. You're not making over your roster. You're adding impact guys at positions of need. That's the subtle change that they're making so far. They had money to spend. They're spending it on impact guys at positions of need. So what remains now is offensive line and safety. You've got to go get probably 2, an interior lineman and a tackle, and you got to go get help at safety. There's some thought that, maybe Mansour Delane, the corner from Virginia Tech that they added, could play some safety. There's some thought there. But you certainly need to go get help at safety and on the offensive line. Those would be the 2 positions, really, that you haven't addressed yet that you need to before this portal window closes. But another day has brought another portal addition. They're up to 8 with Destin Hill now joining the LSU class, the portal class here for 2025. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.